Om Sadashiva Samarambam Shankarashari Madhyamam Asmadasharya Paryantam Vande Guru Param Ishvaro Guratmeti Murti Veda Vibhagine Vyomabda Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Sava Vedanta Siddhanta Gocharam Tamagocharam Govindam Paramanandam Satguru Pranatoshmaham Om Shanti 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 Om Namaste. Bem-vindos à nossa última classe on Tripura. Our last class. I get mixed up with language. So we have seen the verse 72, which brings, he talks about Sadashiva. Creation is a vibration, or it's a projection. I want to review the part in which the author brings the concept of Sadashiva. So let's set back a little bit and reveal verse 63, 67, in which Parasurama say, Master, I have heard your holy words regarding realization and wisdom. My doubts are now cleared. I now understand the non-dual state or non-dual nature of all pervasive consciousness, all abiding in the self as the self, nevertheless. Kindly tell me the essence of the whole discourse in a few words. So he, at the end, he says, now comprise it. Give me in few words, few verses, so that I can memorize it. This summary, and so that I never lose this perspective of reality. So thus requested, Sri Datta again resumed the entire teaching. That which abides as the self is pure intelligence. That which abides as the self is pure intelligence, transcendental being, comprised of the aggregate of all the egos, as if in total perfection. So we present here this pure intelligence, which goes to Ishvara, as we know. That which abides as the self is the source of pure intelligence, which is Ishvara. It's a transcendental being, which somehow comprise all Jivatmas. So at the aggregates of all human egos in total perfection. So this self-conscious transcendental being is self-contained. We understand this concept, and fills the entire universe, fills the role of Maya by virtue of her own powers. This self-contained consciousness somehow takes on the role of the Maya Ishvara by the virtue of its own power, because this consciousness is self-contained. If anything appearing within itself, it appears without no aids of any other factor or principle, okay? Because the self is self-contained. And then we need to consider that Maya is a certain power which is inherent as a potential to the self. Okay, and then comes off the confusion. If Maya is something inherent to the self, and then the self is not one without a second, because there is the self and a certain power. And then we need to remember that Maya, although is inherent to the self, to consciousness, Maya is not real, okay? And the self is the only reality. So there is nothing in terms of reality which brings about the inclusion of a second element such as Maya. Maya is just a superimposition, the most primordial superimposition within consciousness, which is indeed one without a second. Okay, so there is Maya. Apparently, takes the role of Maya by virtue of her own powers. Okay, so consciousness has the power to apparently uh, embrace the superimpositions of namarupas and sustain it and destroy it, through the supreme intelligence of Ishvara. Being one without a second, here it says, this transcendental consciousness makes even the impossible happen and thus displays the universe as a series of images on her own mirror-like conscious mirror. Yeah? And then the Tatreya says, and now I'm going to tell you how this is done. Some distinctive characteristics have to be admitted in order to distinguish consciousness from matter. Huh? Consciousness amounts to a flash of pure intelligence. It is a flash. Boom, it's a spike of pure intelligence. It is of two kinds, the subject and the object. Okay, so it means to say that consciousness manifests as this fundamental duality, the seer and the seen, the experiencer and the experienced, the knower and the known. So this happens due to this this nature of Brahman or Tripura, which is chit, the chit aspect of Brahman, which is consciousness, and it flashes as the knower of the known universe, but it's all in media, it's all in appearance. Okay, so it appears as the subject and the object. So the object depends on the subject, depends on the true nature of the subject for its very existence. Therefore, the manifestation as I is alone admissible. It is imperfect when it is limited to the body or other similar entities. Therefore, the manifestation as I is alone admissible. What does that mean? Help me out there, please.
What it's saying is because only consciousness is really real, the objects aren't really real.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. The manifestation as the self alone is, the reality is admissible. I is imperfect when it's limited to the body identity or other similar entities. And then it says, the author presents a subtle distinction between the perfect I, which is the self, and the imperfect I. This I becomes apparently limited and imperfect when it is identified as the body-mind. Yeah? Because time and space have their being in this supreme intelligence, in this awareness as I. Now, this is the concept of the I behind the I of the Jivatma. We know the nature of consciousness is non-dual, is one consciousness, but we know that there is a split, apparent split that brings about true, limitless, original consciousness and the human consciousness, which is another name for mind. So when it is the mind, it is a limited I, and then, but it's in its pure essence or awareness, it is the I, the true I behind the ego, which is thus perfect. Nothing can possibly surpass it, and yet it is all the phenomenal world. Everything happens within the scope of the supreme consciousness. Therefore, we can say that this self is the aggregate of all human consciousness. So it's because it embraces, aggregates everything that happens in the world of Jivatmas. Yeah? In fact, it aggregates even all the inert objects. Nevertheless, consciousness is distinguished from inertia for the sake of preliminary instruction. Nevertheless, consciousness is distinguished from inertia for the sake of preliminary instruction, so that the disciple may become conversant with the real nature of the self. The self is transcendent. We know that in the beginning we say the nature of the self is non-dual. There is only the nature of reality is non-duality, but then we present the duality, subject object. So this distinction between consciousness and matter energy is presented for the sake of preliminary instructions to the disciple. We understand that concept. We'll see that in Mandukya we're going to demolish every concept that we have gained so far or engaged so far. So Vedanta is about that. We present concepts and then we remove those concepts, so that the disciple grows to become conversant with the real nature of non-dual self. This self, Tripura, is transcendental and it's non-dual. The self is the subject and non-self are the objects. But fundamentally, this consciousness, this Tripura, embraces all individual egos, which are falsely identified with their bodies. She is ego imperfection. So if we call her an ego, because embrace the superimposition of all egos, it would be ego imperfection. This is a kind of, a concept, a strange concept, because ego is always related to reflect consciousness, which is an experiencing entity, and the transcendental consciousness is beyond perfection and imperfection, but somehow it's being presented as perfection, ego imperfection. This is the nature of abstract intelligence. Again, this is unbroken. The I behind the I ego remains before creation. Is self-sufficient, independent in nature, and also called Svatantra. So she turns into action, Kriya, during creation. It is called Maya. Creation is now vibration or metamorphose. It is a mere projection of image within the mirror of consciousness. Shakti cannot be reached by time and much less broken up by space. This consciousness is eternal, and the entire universe follows from this origin. She's also referred as awareness, perfection, awareness, perfect awareness, transcendental, total summation of all egos of her own will divide herself into two. Imperfection is concomitant with such division. There is bound to be an insentient phase which represents the aforesaid exterior, or unmanifest void. The sentient phase is Sadashiva Tattva. So this is that passage that I want to recall. So it talks about imperfection, saying that is concomitant with this apparent scission or division, subject and object, that is bound to be an insentient phase which represents, therefore said, exterior or unmanifest. I think it talks about the causal body. I think we mentioned that before, which is the unmanifest void, which is the sentient phase is Sadashima, the insentient phase, which is, phase, which is the unmanifest or aforesaid exterior or unmanifest void. I think that's how we have interpreted this passage. If anybody can say something. The sentient phase is pure Sattvaguna, pure Sadashiva Tattva, also referred in the Upanishads as Ishvara. Now, Sadashiva is not also not being perfect, sees the unmanifest void. The sentient phase becomes aware of the insentient phase, but yet knows it to be of himself, feeling I am Jesus. So this is the concept of Ishvara being self-known, self-realized, and although not being absolute perfection, it sees the unmanifest void. The sentient phase becomes aware of the insentient phase, but yet knows it to be himself, feeling I am also this. This is a difficult verse. I don't remember what conclusion we came to in our last class. The sentient phase is called Ishvara. It shines with consciousness, now reflected consciousness, pure sattva. And the insentient phase, a note, is called Maya, the Prakriti, the most primordial matter energy, or avidya in the Upanishads. Later, Sadashiva identifies the insentient phase with his body. This is the concept of Ishvara, identify the entire universe as its own body. At the time of creation, when this supreme intelligence goes by the name of Ishvara, then this supreme consciousness goes by the name of Ishvara, the intelligent cause, and then the material cause, and the universe manifest. So he explains in a few verses the process on how the manifestation of the universe. Now this contaminated higher ego, namely Ishvara, this was also interesting concept, funny, saying that Ishvara is the higher ego, divides himself into three aspects: Rudra, Vishnu, and Brahma, represent the modes of ego associated with the three qualities of darkness, brightness, and activity. Brahmas, the creators, are innumerable, and they are all engaged in creating new worlds, new universe, past, present, and future. Vishnus are equally taken up in protecting the worlds, all these different realms. And the Rudras, they are also busy destroying all sorts of different universes. This is the way of creation, says Dattatreya, but all of them are only images in the Grand Bureau of this abstract supreme intelligence or consciousness or awareness. So this is again beautiful, because it presents the process of creation, maintenance, and destruction, and different aspects of Maya, Ishvara. And then in the end, he says, this is the way of creation. But we must remember that all of these things are only images, reflections in the grand mirror of the abstract consciousness. So a reflection is almost as good as non-existent, because it's just a reflection. No? So it means to say that it's not really real and does not contain intrinsic reality because it's a reflection, right? Not with the exception to the case of the human consciousness that although is a reflection, but its essential nature is identical with abstract, pure, limitless consciousness. So these universes are only manifestations, but they are not real, not concrete, since they have never been created in reality. This reminds Mandukya. There is no origination of this universe. It was never created. The Supreme Being is always the sum total of all the egos, just as you feel the body and identify yourself with different senses and organs without deviating from the ego, so does the transcendental pure intelligence similarly identify itself with everything, beginning with Sadashiva and ending with the minutes protoplasma, and yet remains one, non-dual, single manifestation. So it's talking about Ishvara, the manifestation of this pure supreme conscious awareness. It appears and it embraces all the namarupas, all the superimpositions, and it's like the sum total of all egos. Again, this concept of all egos resolve themselves in pure sattvaguna, in pure knowledge of Ishvara, which is not real, but it is the intelligent cause of the unreal world that is available for experience, yeah? But yet it must be rejected or as not real. Just as you feel the body and identify yourself with the organ. So we have the soul feels the body and then it becomes one entity. Yeah? And then it has different sense. There is five sense. There is the five sheaths. There are so many aspects to the body mind. Yeah? But the ego, the individual soul incarnate, refers to itself as one single entity. I never say, oh, who are you? Sometimes I'm my digestion, sometimes I'm my vision, sometimes I'm, no. You just say, I am what I am, yeah? A body-mind, an apparent body-mind. So the same way Ishvara embrace everything, okay, never forgetting its non-dual single nature. Again, just as you cannot taste anything without the aid of the tongue, nor apprehend other things without the aid of other sense or organs, so also this supreme being Sadashiva acts and knows through the agency of Brahma and then Vishnu and Shiva, and even by the worms. So in the macro, in the micro, Sadashiva manifests as Ishvara. It somehow acts, appears as dynamically moving everything in this universe, through the powers of the Brahma, Shiva, Vishnu, and Shiva. It moves all creatures, include the bacteria, the germs, and worms, just as your conscious self remains pure and unqualified, although it forms the base of all the activities of your body-mind, So also the Supreme Intelligence is an effect, though holding all the egos within himself. So It's like there are several aspects of our personality or sense of identity that is held together as one ego, one single ego. Huh? So the same way, consciousness appearing as Ishvara, is going to manifest and act and dynamically move everything in the universe, but without any sense of known oneness, let's say. It's one single self-conscious entity, let's say. The Supreme Sadashiva is in effect while holding all the egos with herself the same way we hold all aspects of our body-mind in oneness. I am the body-mind. She is not aware of any distinctions in the universe, in the vastness of the cosmos, nor does she make difference among the Jivatmas, the egos. So she does not see difference between the Jivatmas. Interesting. She does not see difference because in terms, although Ishvara is not an experiencing entity, he does not see difference, but keeps the account of every Jivatma, meaning to say the ethical, moral, karmic laws are going to be determining the parameter of every single individual. So it does not see distinctions because everything is resolved in Ishvara, but at the same time, it holds the account of every single individual soul. Because this seems to be the purpose of the universe, individual souls growing to understand the total of this manifestation as Ishvara, and later on in due time understand the true nature of Ishvara, Jiva Jagata, as Tripura, as Brahman, as pure, limitless conscious existence. In this manner, the cosmos shines in her like image in a mirror. The shining of the universe is due to her reflection. In the same way, the individuals in the world, namely you, I, and others, and other seers, are all flashes of this consciousness. So we are just small spikes, flashes of consciousness. So these spikes of consciousness, they appear and they resolve themselves back in consciousness, and there is no sense of individuality, truly speaking. All is good, Philip? Since all are only phases of the supreme consciousness that alone will shine in purity, which is bereft of taints or impediments in the shape of objects. See, all the objects have no impact on this supreme consciousness. It alone shines in its purity, in spite of all namarupas, just as the shining mirror is clear when images no longer appear in it, and the same mirror remains pure even when images reflect in it, so also pure intelligence, pure consciousness subsides pure, remains pure and untainted, whether the world is reflected or not. So this is a concept pretty much known by us. It needs to be put to check again and again to the extent of our viveka, in which we can determine that there is something, within our human experience, which is not the mind or the intellect, that remains pure and unchanging, yeah, regardless of whatsoever reflection occurs in our minds. So we experience the world. We are micro reflectors experiencing our environment, and consciousness, which is the true nature of this reflector, remains always untainted and pure, regardless of the three states, regardless of whatsoever parabata karma we are being delivered. Yeah. So this consciousness is like a mirror, self-conscious, self-contained mirror, projecting the world, or reflecting the world in the human mind. And this self-contained, self-conscious awareness remains always untainted, regardless of reflections, no reflections, the three states, and regardless of the nature of our prarabdha karma. Therefore, it's also pure intelligence and subsists pure. Whether the world is appearing, reflect on it or not. This untainted supreme intelligence is one without a second and filled with bliss because it is totally free from the least trace of unhappiness. The sum total of all happiness of all living beings has taken shape as the Supreme One, because she is obviously desired by all, and she is no other than the Self, which consists of pure bliss, because the Self is the most beloved of everyone. This is the most beautiful combination of verse of this conclusion, in which the Taittiriya presents the fact, address the concept of the Ananda nature of consciousness. We know consciousness has the Ananda nature, the existence nature, and the Chit nature, which is knowingness, knowledge. So here he addressed this consciousness in its Ananda nature, and it is Ananda because it is one without a second. So being of non-dual nature is what defines the concept, the metaphysical Vedanta concept of limitlessness and fullness, wholeness, and completion, because there is only you without a second. And then there is this sense of completion and security as well. Therefore, this supreme intelligence is totally free from the least trace of unhappiness. So again, remembering that this supreme conscious existence is not an experiencing entity, but it's free from the least trace of incompletion, let's say, or limitation, okay? Which is translated as happiness or unhappiness from the standpoint of the Jiva-atmas, reflected consciousness, because reflect consciousness are the experiencing entities that are going to experience happiness and unhappiness, as we know. Right? So, but this supreme intelligence is the very source of completion, wholeness. Therefore, it's one without a second. It has no trace of a sense of lack or incompletion, okay, which in the human experience is translated as something is missing, therefore I'm not satisfied, I'm not happy. Yeah? So happiness and unhappiness does not apply to the supreme intelligence. And then the Tatra goes to say that the sum total of all happiness experienced by the Jiva Atmas has taken the shape as the Supreme One, because this Tripura is obvious desired by all. This is very, very relevant because we love that which gives us Ananda. And we know that we love our conscious existence more than anything. So we love anything that gives us happiness, that gives us a sense of Ananda. So it is loved by all. And the love that everybody has to conscious existence, manifests or takes shape as the Supreme Self, because it is obvious desired by all. So we all search for this happiness, and we search it, as we know, due to this avidya phenomenon. We search in objects of experience rather than in our very nature as conscious existence. So one Supreme One, because she's obviously loved by all, and she's no other than the self within each one, searching for the love to be, or trying to hold, as if I am the body, I want immortality. Immortality is not possible for the body, as we know. Immortality is our very nature. So everybody would like to desire immortality, say, I love my existence and I am identified, I have attached my existence to the physical body. Therefore, I want my physical body to be eternal, immortal. So, and then everybody desires, mistakenly enough, the immortality for the body, without understanding that what I desire is my eternal existence, which by nature is immortal. Because it's all a question of identity or identification, either with my limitless, eternal nature, which is immortal, or with matter energy, which is a passing phenomenon. It's all a question of identity, identification. And the good news is that this supreme self consciousness is no other than the self within each one of us, I myself, which consists of pure Ananda, because the self is the most loved of every being. Again, we love that which gives us Ananda, happiness, and everybody loves one's conscious existence more than anything. Okay, what is the indication? Is my conscious existence must be the very source of bliss, love, security. Because I love that most of any other thing, more than any other thing. Well, we can debate this. There are some people who loves suffering, but then it's some dysfunctional things that sometimes happens in the human mind. People become dysfunction, and then they like suffering. They like to impose suffering on others and things like that. But generally speaking, everybody wants to be happy, to to be blissful, to feel whole, complete, satisfied, in peace. And that is the nature of everyone searching for this experience of happiness, is the self. For the sake of the self, people discipline their bodies and subdue their desires, and all sensual pleasures are mere sparks of bliss inherent in the self. So, for the sake of pleasing the self, myself, people discipline the people with spiritual vasanas. They go through all kinds of disciplines, to control or regulate their desires, such as sensual pleasures. Yeah? And but for that, one needs to come to the understand that all sensual pleasures are mere uh, sparks of the bliss which is inherent in one's very nature. Mhm. There is a note: spiritual people are known to lead abstemious uh, lives, to deny ordinary comfort and pleasures to the bodies, and they even torture them sometime in order that they may secure a happy existence after death. So those things they happen. The people they believe they have to suppress, those ordinary vasanas which are running through objects of sensory pleasures, and say no, we have to fight. And then they can go to certain extremes. Why? Because they say no, I'm done with living for the purpose of sensual pleasures. I want to secure happiness after life, after death. So Vedanta says that this has to be pursued and gained in this life and in this life alone. Therefore, their actions clearly prove their love for the self. They love the self so much that they want to even sacrifice this life, okay, depriving it of all kinds of pleasures and comforts for the after death, afterlife, love for the self. Their hope for future ananda, future bliss, future completes, further establish the unique, beautific nature of the self. So it's a nice concept. And even those people that deny themselves all pleasures and comforts of life, they are proving the value of the self, okay? Which is something much beyond the essential pleasures that are searched for most human beings. So I say, no, I sacrifice a life moved by desires for sensual pleasures. And I don't care for enlightenment, but I believe that the self survives this birth, and I believe that I will be enjoying a certain ananda, after life, after death. Okay, so it's enough. It's another logic, yeah, pointing to the fact that the love of the self surpasses the love for all sense pleasures. For sensual pleasures are similar to a sense of relief felt on unburdening oneself, crushing load. So we have seen it last class. So we are there. We have a huge list of desires for completion. Yeah? And those desires, they create a psychological load. Yeah? This psychological load, it becomes so dense and abstract that is experienced as a sense of dissatisfaction or unhappiness at all times. You understand? So it is a load. Yeah? But then here and there, when you satisfy one of these desires, whatsoever it is as if that psychological load has a small relief, a momentary, a fleeting relief. Now I got something that somehow is going to hide my psychological load, which manifests as a sense of dissatisfaction and unhappiness. Pure consciousness is indeed bliss because it's the only one sought for. Everything is searching for this happiness. The happiness gained by sensual pleasures, they are just like dropping a load for a moment, which needs to be picked up because the mind has a numberless list of desires for completions. desires for happiness in objects, which are going to appear again and again, giving almost no relief to the Jivatma. Bliss is the self. Objects are thoughts taking concrete forms. Objects are thoughts manifesting as Namarupa, as objects. Thoughts arise from the thinker, and the thinker connotes intelligence. Everything resolves itself to consciousness. From consciousness rise thoughts. Thoughts presuppose the thinker, and thinker is going to manifest the concrete forms of the objects in the world. Of course, we do that in conjunction with Maya Ishwara. So we want so much. We have so many thoughts, desiring thoughts towards objects, that the total sum of all desires, the collective vasanas, desires, bring about concrete form, tangible forms to our desiring thoughts or thoughtings relating to desires for object. If the thinker be purged of even the least trace of thought, individuality is lost and abstract intelligence left is realized. So this is an important point. So if the thinker, which is but a thought, I am the body mind and I want what I want, if we forget ourselves for even a least trace, a moment, for even the least trace of thought, we lose our sense of individuality. And I guess that's why samadhi has such appeal to human beings, or deep sleep has also a great appeal to human beings, because the load of our likes and dislikes, our vasanas, is somehow dropped. And then we have a sense of completion, which is, strangely enough, it appears when the sense of individuality is lost. So how to lose the sense of individuality without losing the ability to function in this world? So only by knowledge, and knowledge alone. Understanding, since it is the ultimate reality synonymous with emancipation or immortality, there must be beatitude in it in order that it may be sought by all living beings. In fact, it is compact with completion, fullness, bliss. It's a dense fullness, wholeness, completion, or bliss. How? Because the contrary, meaning to say unhappiness, is associated with the exterior. It appears and disappears. So why it is determined by logic here that the self is a dense ocean, sometimes put, of bliss, of completion. And then he presents the logic, because the contrary, which is unhappiness or misery, is associated with the objects out there, and we have no control. The exterior with its objects appear and disappear, and that does not give us a sense of security, and much less of completion, because it's not easy to get what you want at all times. So such the ananda nature, the bliss nature, cannot be the case of unhappiness. If unhappiness formed part of the self. So unhappiness is absolute, something foreigner to the self. The self and the not self. The not self is are the objects, the Jiva Atma objects and the other objects appearing within the field of the Jiva Atma. This is all matter energy, and this is the not self. So the not self lives in the world in which everything appears and disappears, changing from moment to moment, and happiness is not possible there. Therefore, unhappiness is not inherent to the self, but it's inherent to the not self. That's the point made here. Pleasure might similarly be said to be associated with the body, the sense, the possession, however, a little thought will convince one that these so-called enjoyments are meant only for the self and to the self alone, because what we are searching is the inner source of Ananda. Yeah? We go to that statement and say that everything we do is for the sake of our love to the self. We do all search for enjoyment is for the sake of the self, because it's an unconscious search for the happiness and peace, which is the nature of the self. It's almost as if Jiva subconsciously knows that one's nature is peace, love, and satisfaction, happiness. And one search that. And so every search is for the sake of enjoying the self, because consciously or unconsciously, we feel that there is something wrong with unhappiness, with this sense of incompletion. Therefore, we all the time try to remove this sense of incompletion for the sake of the self. So the self is that which matters and nothing else, but every little being always seeks pleasures in objects. Thus, pleasure is the nature of the self. Everybody is looking for something which is the self, the nature of the self, but indirectly through the five senses, contacting the world of objects. But sensual pleasure is otherwise quite obvious, whereas the bliss of the self is purely imaginary because it's not similarly experienced. So what is this? What does the Taittiriya want to say? Pleasure, sensual pleasure is obvious to the Jiva because the entity, the experience entity, experience pleasure and pain all the time. But the bliss of the self, it remains as something like philosophical, imaginary, because the self is not an experiencing entity. It's not an experienced entity. It cannot be experienced objectively. Yeah? So therefore, everybody falls for what? Object that produce some sensual pleasures, because it's too vague, too abstract, and the notion that myself, I am the true source of bliss. Huh? So, and then he says here that the scriptures, in this case, must be brought into play against this notion, this contention. The scriptures say that all the sense pleasures do not together amount to a particle of the inherent bliss, which is the nature of the I, the self. So we trust the scriptures, yes, we do. Yeah? And how can we put it to test? We can, but we need to be persistent, and somehow stop feeding those sensual pleasure desires for objects. Otherwise, we are feeding this ignorance, and we are not really developing further Shraddha and enjoying the fruits of this growing understanding of one's nature as Shanti, as peace, as fullness. So therefore, the scriptures say that the sense pleasures are nothing compared with the pleasure. And the pleasure an object can do is in opposition to the pain of carrying the load of all those desires. And that pleasure, it appears as a peak, it's like and appears as an experience of happiness connected to a certain happening, a gain of something. So, but the bliss of the self, it is of a different nature. It's not in opposition to a depression, or a down. It is just a sort of peace, shanti, and confidence in one's nature, which is one without a second. Right, Lynn?
Absolutely right.
Just as unlimited space, or just as consciousness is unknown when pure, but becomes manifest in its association with object. Okay, and then we have those uh, analogies. Yeah? We have space, but it's not perceivable. But when you erect some walls, and then appears that the space is contained in certain walls, or the space within the pot appears to be different from the exterior space. There are several analogies, So there is an analogy of electricity. Electricity is one and the same, but unless there is a bulb or a refrigerator or anything, it's not verifiable. It's not experienced, because it's running through the walls, but it's not verifiable. So the same way consciousness is all pervasive, but it can become an experience entity, through the body mind of all Jivatmas. Yeah. And then says that a pot for fetching water, so also bliss in the same way. Bliss in purity is not enjoyable objectively, but the same becomes enjoyable when broken up in essential pleasure. This is very interesting because it points to the fact that life does not really need to be rejected, and some enjoyment is always available. In fact, it's much more available after self-knowledge, because the mind has dropped much or most of that load of vasanas, the sense of incompletion that produce dissatisfaction and unhappiness. No? So sense pleasures are okay, no? But there is something which is superior to that. And then it says that this bliss, this consciousness, is not an object to be enjoyed, but it can become the enjoyer, as if broken up through the experience, the sensual pleasure experience of Jivatma. So one can enjoy sensual pleasures from the standpoint of the understanding that the nature of Ananda is inherent to the self, but it's not an object of experience, but it can be experienced as a sense of confidence, fullness, completion, and peace and satisfaction. Okay, but it's not really such as sensual pleasure. But now we have the opportunity to gain this knowledge and then enjoy the world without the load of one's need of the world. Okay? One may contend that the self is not bliss, but it seeks bliss. If that were true, why should there be happiness? Ish. No, we have to finish it. Mamma mia, I think I should have. Next. No, we're gonna finish today, okay? Are we together here? Okay. So there is the concept that the self is not bliss, but it seeks bliss. So this is a concept. Why should there be happiness in relieving oneself of a crushing load? One may contend that the self is not bliss, but it seeks bliss. If that were true, why should there be happiness in relieving oneself of a crushing load? This is perceptible at the instant of relief, and similar happiness prevails in dreamless slumber. In these two instances, there are no positive source of pleasure, and yet there it is. So it's saying that all sense pleasure, when we release the load of our vasanas, our desires for pleasure, there is a certain pleasure, but it's not positive by nature. It's negative. It depends on giving up desires and aversions. In these two instances, there are no positive souls. This pleasure is, however, real, since it is within one's experience and cannot also be avoided. Therefore, it must be of the nature of the self. So it's the happiness we gain through such pleasures is not a positive in nature, yet it is experience. So again, it goes to the simple concept that the joy and the happiness is not in the object. If it's not in the object, where it is. So this pleasure is, however, experienced. So it is within one's experience and cannot be avoided. Therefore, it must be the very nature of the self. That's why we sleep and we say, I slept happily. And say that all creatures long for sleep, even the worst savage would not relish sleep, nor indeed long for it. The question, right, if bliss be of the nature of the self, why it's not always felt? This is a good one. The answer is that the inherent bliss is obstructed by desires, aversions, obligations, and all predispositions, the vasanas, the desiring vasanas, dominating the mind. Just as the perennial sound arising from within our body is not heard only through the interference of external sound. This is a very nice concept as well. These little blisses, they are going to obstruct our inner bliss. The same way sounds outside are going to obstruct the inner sounds in our belly or in our ear or something like that. We get distracted with this denser external bits and pieces of pleasures. The pain of the load predominates for the time being over the other natural painful dispositions of the mind and disappears at the instant of unburdening. So we are carrying this load, psychological load of desires and fears. And it is a load that dominates the mind and producing these dispositions. And it disappears at the instant of dropping the load. During the interval before the other dispositions lie latent. So we know these desires, they are latent. They are there in the causal body and they just rise up again. And then there is no peace except for an infinitesimal moment. Other sensual pleasures are also to be explained in the same way. There is an infinite variety of predispositions laying dormant in the mind, ready to spring up at the right moment. They are always like thorns in the pillow. When one of them stick out, it predominates over the others. And that's a nice analogy. I guess in those days they used to do pillows with things that contain small, here and there some thorns. And it says just like a pillow. When there is one thorn sticking out, it's going to dominate our attention, and we're going to forget that there are other thorns inside there. So such are the disposition of the mind. Its manifestation takes the shape as intense desire or fear. Its prevalence is painful in proportion to its intensity, according to the intensity of one's likes and dislikes. the pain is going to be more or less. When that subsides on fulfillment, the pain disappears for a moment, infinitesimal period, until the next predisposition appears, the next desire. This interval represents the pleasure associated with the self. It is the self. It's the self shines with its nature as satisfaction, peace. Well, and we are deceived to believe that it's from the gain of certain object. Thus, everyone's rush for enjoyment and betrays the search for the true source of happiness as the self in the self. And everybody remains confused. If asked why no one seems to know the real genesis of bliss, the answer is overwhelming ignorance born of associating the pleasure with those experiences, those incidents, those objects gained. The opinion prevails that pleasure is caused by such and such incident or event and is destroyed when things change. The fact is that pleasure is simply the nature of the eternal self. People do not recognize the bliss inherent as their own self because of ignorance. They always associate pleasure with object. Furthermore, just as images in a mirror are associated with objects, ignoring the presence of the mirror, the reflect surface, but after consideration are found to be dependent on the mirror and not apart from it, and the mirror found to be untainted by reflecting image, so also the sages know the self alone to be unique. Everything is just a reflection, the same concept is presenting a further uh, logic, yeah? Which shows that the objects are just reflections occurring in consciousness, in the mind. Consciousness is the mind is purified from its desires and fears, ragas and diversions. It's going to reflect the objects, but it's not going to be subject to the ignorance and the suffering produced by attraction and repulsion towards these or that objects. So these understand that the objects are just images in a mirror also resolves the problem of this ignorance that compels every ignorant Jivatma to chase objects of experience for the sake of ananda, ignoring the fact that all is happening in its self, which is by nature ananda. No? The relation of the cosmos, the universe, to pure intelligence, the all-pervasive, most subtle, abstract self is like that of a pot to earth, or of an ornament of gold, or a sculpture to the granite rock. So the universe and pure consciousness has a certain apparent relationship, yeah? Similar to the clay pot to the clay. Okay, so the clay is the fundamental nature of the pot. The universe has its fundamental nature in consciousness. For Rasurama, denial of the existence of the world does not amount to perfection. Denial is absurd because it remains there, appearing and available for experience. Denial is absurd, for it implies intelligence, and intelligence implies itself as the universe. So in this text, we are not going to reject and deny the existence of the universe, okay? And it's said to be absurd to do so. Denial is absurd, for it implies intelligence, and intelligence displays itself as the universe. So this is a good concept, which goes to those expressions of the teaching that says that there are two orders of reality. One is Satya, which is real, and the other is mithya, which is apparently real. So when we say apparently real, we give it a certain status as reality. What kind of reality? A reality of something that appears and disappears, changing from moment to moment. So we cannot give that concept and say you cannot deny the apparent mithya nature of this universe. It's not absolutely real, okay? And it's absurd to say that it's non-existent. Although from a logical point of view, Mandukya, and especially the author of the Karikas, what's his name? I forgot right now. Yeah, it presents the logic that destroys the sense of any and all sense of existence of the universe. The intelligence denying or admitting the world is there shining over all. Can the world be erased out of existence by mere denial of it? No, but it can be seen as mithya. So this supreme consciousness, denying or admitting the world is there shining over all, can the world be erased out of existence by denying? No. Here, the point is that the absolute consciousness is alone the only reality, notwithstanding the concrete modifications which are no better than images in the mirror. Now it again reduces the universe as just reflections in the mirror of the only reality, which is consciousness. And this consciousness is not a fact or tainted, and it does not exist as part of the reflection. Let me read it. Here, the point is that absolute consciousness alone is real, and it remains ever absolute, notwithstanding the concrete modifications, which are no better than images in a mirror, not tainting it. So the reflections do not affect or taint this consciousness. And this universe, which are reflection, do not exist apart from consciousness. Therefore, we can say that all are real, but they are real in their fundamental, essential, abstract nature as consciousness. He says everything, the universe is real, but in their abstraction. So the universe is real in its essential nature as conscious existence, not as namarupas. Namarupas are just like names and forms of gold, and gold being the only reality. Just as the images appear in a mirror and partake of its nature, so also the cosmos is of and in the self, and real, inasmuch as it is the self. The note is the world is not real as the objects, it's real as consciousness, the self. This wisdom in perfection is the realization of all as the self. Intelligence appears as object by its own virtue, as a mirror appears as the image on it. It is the whole essence of the scriptures. There is no bondage, no liberation. There is no aspirant, no process of attaining liberation. The transcendental conscious principle alone subsists in the three states of being. She remains as the one uniform absolute being. She is beyond ignorance and wisdom. She is beyond bondage and liberation. She is also the process of seeking removal of bondage and the gain of liberation. This is all that needs to be known, Parasaram, understood and realized. There is nothing more. I have told you all in order. So here in this part it says that there is nothing real in this world. There is no real bondage. There is no liberation. There is no seeker or disciple or aspirant. There is no process of purification and development. None of these is real, but yet they do exist. They do exist within Mitya, which is not real. But as I often say, it is within Mitya that Satya can be realized. Thus, transcendental conscious principle alone subsists as all of these. This is all that need to be known, all that need to be understood. I have told you everything. The sage then concluded, the man who knows it rightly will never be overtaken by misery. Oh, Narada, such is a section of wisdom recondite with reason, subtlety, and experience. It's good that he has put experience there because it has to be put to the test. So this is the Upanishad. This is pure Jnana Yoga, Vedantic Jnana Yoga is pure wisdom, and is sustained by logic, by reason, and it's very subtle. And it can be tested and applied experientially. Should anyone not gain wisdom after hearing or reading this Tripura Rahasya, but continue to wallow in ignorance, this person should be put down as nothing more than a stock or a stone of a man. What hope is there for him? So he's being radical. We should never take it literally because we know that ignorance is very, very dense and we all do our best. Hearing it even once must make a man truly wise if the person is highly qualified. Even all obstructions to this wisdom is destroyed by reading and contemplating on it, Shravana, Manana, and Jityasana. You can study it, hear it, write it, appreciating and discussing with your friends, teaching, sharing the contents of this knowledge. This will destroy the sense of duality, it will purify your mind and reveal the abiding truth of the self. This self, Tripura, goes by the name of emancipation when clearly and directly realized by investigation as the one undivided self of all Jiva selves. Otherwise, she goes by the name of bondage when this knowledge is not clearly gained, established, or realized. The consciousness goes by the name of freedom or moksha when clearly and directly understood and realized the lights of the teachings of the Upanishads. Otherwise, the Jiva Atma goes by the name of bondage rather than moksha. It is one and the same consciousness spreading the three states of being, including the ignorant samsari, but untainted and unbroken by all of this. She is the sound, the word, and the significance of hearing. What is hearing? H-R-I-M. Do you know that one?
I'm not clear on Harim.
Okay.
I take it as Om.
Yeah, I thought he was going to close this on, but no. So that ends the concluding chapter in the most sacred Tripura Rahasya. Now it's indeed a very beautiful text, pure Jnana Yoga, pure Vedanta. I enjoyed. I hope you guys enjoyed as well. And we move on to the Mandukya from next Monday on. Okay? Feel free to read a little bit the text to help me out as we unfold it. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namaste. Thank you, dear friends. We meet again soon, Ishwara. Malam. Thanks, Ishwara. You held the internet for us today. Namaste. Thank you. Bye-bye.